Yeah, I've got just about 16 minutes or so to do this before I leave. But I was reading something just now over at the satam.sonicforums.com, the satamsonic.com forum. And what I read was about aging. One person pointed out something that obviously is correct. And that is, if Archie Comics never plans to end the comic real soon, which obviously they don't, there's no need to kind of explain how old the character is. You see, I think that's a misconception sometimes in a comic book. Depending on which comic it is, time is irrelevant in that comic. Now the difference between things like, let's say, Marvel's X-Men, and some of the Marvel's X-Men, and Spider-Man, and Avengers, and DC's comics of Batman, Superman, Justice League, Wonder Woman. The big difference between them sometimes is all about time. You see, since they're more kind of like, since their characters are more almost, well, superhuman based in a sense, the stories take place in a more reality-based world. Sort of a real-time, real night and day deal. Just like Archie Comics. But the only difference, though, is sometimes they have to kind of soft retcon and soft reboot, or entirely retcon and reboot a universe or a comic or something like that to tie into more modern times. I mentioned Archie Comics. You can't expect someone like Archie Andrews and his friends to remain the way they were back in the 40s, right? Throughout the decades, they had to retcon and reboot Archie to match with the time. So yeah, he's the oldest living, him and his friends are the oldest living teenagers in the world. And true, they've done what they can to move them out of Riverdale High and stuff like that. I get that. Heck, they even did a freaking live-action reunion movie called Return to Riverdale. Just to prove that. Just to go along with the times. But the thing is, the more you look at it, the main Archie comic, along with comics like DC and Marvel's, like DC Comics and Marvel Comics, always follow a real-time scenario. So that now that we're in the year of 2014, of course a lot of the stories are going to take place in 2014. They may not indicate it, but the clues and references in the comics pretty much show you that. Unlike Sonic the Hedgehog, though, which takes place not only possibly in a distant future, in another dimension, if you will, but takes place in the year 3236 or whatever it is. Basically in a world that's in the future, so basically that allows for time not to be a problem. And thus the aging of a character doesn't become a problem either. Now I know some people might say, well, they need to age the characters. They need to give them some kind of relevance by making them older so that they can reminisce and stuff. And that is true. I totally get that. But the point is, just because you want that to happen doesn't mean it has to. Now I admit one of the problems people had with Mobius years later, and still have to this day, is the fact that you freaking aged the characters. Now there was a reason for that, because that story took place 25, 30 years later from the current timeline, or now the soft retcon current timeline, or however you want to look at it. It took place around that time frame. So you had to age the characters. You had to make them parents. You had to make them have kids. You had to do all that. You had to do all that. Even if some of the kids even if some of the kids in the Mobius Year storyline, their existence never really made any sense, if you get my drift. But point is, the aging process all depends. The aging process of a character all depends on how the media looks at it. Take a look at Mickey Mouse, for example. For years, he's been the same age. For years, he's been the same character. All that's been adapted for him is putting him in a more modern setting. That's all that's been adapted for him. That's all they've done is take Mickey Mouse, took Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, Clarabelle, and put them in a more modern setting to interact with more modern devices. That's all they did. True, Mickey and Minnie are probably one of the longest dating couples in history. They have yet to officially marry. But to me, the point is, the point is this. It's all about adapting, depending on how what direction your franchise goes in. True, you could say, oh, well, this character is celebrating their 60th birthday, and yet they don't look a day over 15 or a day over 20. It's because, they could be in existence for 60, 70, 80 years, but if they don't look over a day over 15 or a day over 20, it's because that's how the franchise wants you to perceive them. It's an old saying. In fact, there was an episode in the cartoon that I have on DVD called The Lionhearts. And in The Lionhearts, there was an episode where Leo Lion was going to be a presenter at the time, I guess, the MGM's 75th anniversary. And the storyline going into this was, Leo had to lose weight. Okay, so he had to lose weight. Alright, no problem. But also, the other little plot there was he couldn't have any gray hairs. And that his look, by losing weight and not having gray hairs, had to be young. Basically, that adjective is very true in things like Hollywood. They're very true. You see, that's an adjective that's being carried over into comics and into cartoons and all that. That the characters have to remain young, or in their eyes, in the eyes of the people behind the characters or behind the adaptations that the characters are in, people will become unattractive to them and will not like them anymore if they start aging. See, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. I mean, for real people like myself, you guys watching, and anybody else, aging is a part of life. I mean, I look at this goatee I have, and I look at some of the hairs on my head, and some of them are gray. It's all about aging. Yeah, I may look young still. Me and my sisters may be mistaken for people in our 20s still, but it's, and that's great, and that's very complimentary of people to say that. But when you start having gray hairs, that's a sign of that. You may look younger than you are. You may look younger than what you are, but the gray hairs kind of give away the fact that you yourself are getting older. And that's a fact. That's a true on fact. I mean, we can't always remain young, right? It's taking the time to... But like I said, we can't always remain young, and that's a fact. That's a fact that's true to life. It really is. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you look at it, it's true. With someone like me, I've been into the comics for 20 years now. For 21 years now. 21 years. So you can imagine the age I was when I started, compared to now. I've been a fan of the franchise since it began, and that was 23 years ago. Exactly. So you can imagine the fact that I've grown up with this franchise. The point is, like I'm saying, aging when it comes to media. It all depends on how the media wants you to perceive the aging of a character in a comic or a cartoon or whatever. This is why, some people do find it a little controversial or a little disappointing that Sega and mostly Archie Comics doesn't take that step and say, okay, yeah, Sonic is almost 20 years old, and here, we'll show you he's aged a little bit to be that age now. Or, yeah, he's aged to be almost 25 years old, and here, we'll show you that he's a little taller now, and he's more mature looking and all that. That might be the best way to go, but guess what? It's also something they don't want to do because it might make their character unattractive to a new generation that's heard about it. Now, Amy Rose, you might say, well, she started out young and then they changed her. Yeah, they changed her because with Sonic Adventure, they were sort of rebooting the franchise, especially in time for the Dreamcast. So they had to change the designs of some characters to make them look young, but also match up to the age of Sonic, in a sense, or close to it. And Amy's redesign was to kind of help propel that. Now, does it seem like she's aged a little bit? Of course it does. Let's put it this way. In the past 15 years, game-wise, the franchise has been rebooted not once, not twice, but I think 3 times. And during one of those other times, the reboot basically stated that Amy was around, if not a year or so younger than Sonic. Maybe 2 years younger, but very mature for her age. And obviously this was proven, as I mentioned before, in issue 222 of Archie Comics, of the Archie comic book. So basically, again, it all depends on how aging is perceived in media with the characters. Like I said, with Marvel and DC, sometimes it all depends on how they want to play into real day and time, into real day and night time, if you get my drift. But most of the time, as we have seen with some of the retcons, some of the reboots, the characters always end up being and remaining young again. And why? Because it makes it more attractive to a new generation. That's why. That's why you haven't really seen Tails age that much in the games. That's why you haven't seen Amy, except for what I mentioned. From what I mentioned with Amy, that's the only time you've ever seen her age. And it ever become kind of permanent. Tails, he seems to have aged a bit, but not really. You see, it's all about keeping the characters young and attractive to a new generation. And that's why you'll never see aging of a character take place as much as you want to. Like I said, it all depends on who the manufacturer, who the distributor is. DC and Marvel, they have no problem aging the characters if they have to, or even killing off the characters if they have to. But if the character is too popular, or if they want to keep is too popular, if the character is too popular, or they want to keep the character going, and even keep the series going, and the universe going, they gotta softly retcon and reboot it so that those characters, that universe, remains young. And that's why, again, getting back to the whole Sonic deal, why you don't see Sonic age as much as he should, if at all. So, even though past events that he's gone through, comic book-wise and video game-wise, would assume that he should age. But, again, that's just how it is. But that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. I gotta get to work. Peace out.